Of course, in his experience, civilization had never been all that safe either. Back home, he'd had to worry about a murder charge that wasn't true hanging over his head, and he'd gotten in trouble any number of times in St. Louis. Anywhere there were people, a good number of them were going to be sorry sons, and that was just the way of the world. Not far away, a footstep whispered on the soft duff under the trees. Breckenridge raised the tomahawk a little. A man stepped into view between him and the rocks where Morgan was hidden. The man wore buckskins, and his reddish-bronze face was painted for battle. Breck recognized him right away as a Blackfoot, and knew his instincts had been right. The Blackfeet hated all white men and killed everyone they came across. Breckenridge raised the tomahawk and tensed to leap at the warrior. As he did, he heard a tiny crack somewhere behind him. Instantly, he knew that was a twig snapping under the foot of someone else. "Behind us!" he shouted to Morgan as he leaped from behind the tree. "It's a trick!" He heard a flutter and then a thud, and knew without looking back that an arrow had just embedded itself in the tree trunk. If he'd moved a split second later, the wickedly sharp flint arrowhead would be buried in his flesh. The warrior who had served as the decoy whirled toward Breckenridge and slashed at him with a knife. Breck twisted enough that the blade stirred the fringe on the sleeve of his buckskin shirt, but didn't cut him. He brought the tomahawk down on the warrior's wrist and heard the sharp crack of bone breaking. The man's fingers opened, and he dropped the knife. The Blackfoot had a tomahawk too. He tried to yank it from the loop at his waist where he carried it, but Breckenridge didn't give him enough time to do that. Breck swung his hawk in a backhand that shattered the warrior's jaw. A swift, looping overhand swing cleaved the Blackfoot's skull to the eyes. While that was happening, both of Morgan's pistols boomed. As the reports echoed through the forest, Breckenridge bent at the waist and twisted, kicked the dead Blackfoot away from him, and spotted another warrior charging at him. He dived for the man's knees and upended him. They wound up in a tangle on the forest floor. The Blackfoot was lean and wiry, but his muscles were like thick cables. He thrust a knife at Breckenridge's throat, but Breck caught the man's wrist while the point was just shy of its target. The Blackfoot was strong, but the strength of the massive young man, sometimes called Flame Hair, was legendary on the frontier. Breck squeezed the warrior's wrist until bones ground together. The Blackfoot let out an involuntary gasp as he dropped the knife. His other hand had hold of Breckenridge's wrist. For the time being, he was keeping Breck from dashing his brains out with the tomahawk. Breck knew he could overcome his opponent eventually, but he didn't want to take the time to do that. He needed to see how Morgan was faring with the other attackers. Breckenridge lowered his head and butted the top of it into the warrior's face. He felt the hot spurt of blood from the man's crushed nose. The stunning impact made the warrior's grip slip. Breck yanked his arm loose and slammed the tomahawk down. More blood flew as the Blackfoot died. Breckenridge surged up, saw Morgan a few yards away, wrestling with another warrior. A fourth Blackfoot lay sprawled on his back nearby, a dark hole in his forehead where the heavy ball from one of Morgan's pistols had smashed into him. A pool of blood spread around the back of his head. Morgan was putting up a good fight, but he appeared to be getting the worst of it. The warrior was on top of him, hands wrapped around his throat, choking the life out of him. Breckenridge reached them in 2 swift strides, gripped the tomahawk with both hands, and swung it with all his strength. The hawk's keen, blood-smeared head struck the warrior on the side of the neck, cut all the way to bone, and then sheared through the Blackfoot's spine as well.